Practice note. Discovery. Draft attempts reveal extended presence, a forensic analysis of drafting duration, risk tolerance, and behavioral indicators of insider knowledge. When we examine what forensic documents actually reveal about the ransom note, we are forced to confront something that contradicts the narrative of rapid intruder activity. An intruder entering a home with the intention of abducting a child would come prepared. They would have a plan. They would have written their ransom demand beforehand, in a location where they could work carefully, refine their language, ensure their message was clear. An intruder would not walk into someone else's home in the middle of the night and begin drafting a 3-page ransom note without planning. An experienced criminal does not improvise something this consequential. An opportunistic abductor does not compose elaborate prose while exposed to detection. Yet the evidence suggests exactly that. The note was not brought prepared. It was written on paper found in the home. It was written with a pen found in the home. And critically, there is evidence that it was drafted, revised, and drafted again on the same pad of paper. This discovery, that the note was not a first draft, that practice attempts were made, tells us something fundamental about extended presence in the home, about comfort with risk, about someone not rushed by the urgency of escape. The location of drafting. Where would an intruder feel safe? The ransom note was written on paper, taken from the middle of a pad, located in the Ramsey home. This is forensically significant not for the obvious reason that the materials came from the home, but for what it reveals about where the drafting occurred. Someone drafting a ransom note with extreme care, practicing, revising, attempting multiple versions, would need to be in a location where they felt safe from interruption. They would need to be in a space where they would not be discovered mid-composition. They would need to feel sufficiently secure to spend time on refinement. An intruder in a home at night does not feel safe. An intruder is acutely aware of time pressure. An intruder knows that every moment increases the risk of detection. The longer an intruder remains in the home, the higher the probability of discovery. Yet the evidence of multiple draft attempts suggests someone who felt comfortable enough to work slowly, to revise, to experiment with language until they arrived at what they wanted. This is not the psychology of an intruder. This is the psychology of someone whose presence in the home was not extraordinary. Someone for whom being in certain rooms, at certain hours, was not immediately suspicious. Someone who lived there. The evidence of practice. What the drafts reveal. Court documents note that examination of the notepad revealed evidence that the writer had attempted earlier drafts of the note. Additionally, another page in the pad had written on it, Mr. and Mrs. I, which many believe to have been an early, false start of the ransom note. This is not a detail that appears in haste-written communications. This is the signature of someone working through language, testing how the note should begin, reconsidering phrasing. Mr. and Mrs. I appears to be an initial attempt to address the recipients. It is formal, precise, then abandoned. Someone beginning a ransom note would naturally start this way. But an experienced criminal, a prepared abductor, would not spend time on multiple attempts in the victim's home. They would arrive with their language already decided. The fact that the drafter attempted and rejected Mr. and Mrs. I suggests someone working in real time, composing as they went, refining their approach. This is someone thinking through the communication, not someone reciting from memory or from a prepared script. An intruder with no prior planning would not behave this way. An intruder would either abandon the note or write it quickly, minimizing time exposed. But the evidence of multiple drafts suggests deliberation. This suggests someone with time to invest in getting the phrasing right. Someone who was not afraid of being found in the act of drafting. The paper sourcing. Middle of the pad, not the top. The ransom note was drafted on paper, taken from the middle of a pad of paper located in the home. Additional sheets were missing from the pad and were never located. Think about what this means forensically. If an intruder grabbed the nearest notepad, they would take paper from the top. They would grab a sheet and write. They would not remove pages from the middle of a pad. That action requires the pad to be placed on a surface where someone can access the middle, remove specific sheets, and continue work on those sheets without leaving other sheets conspicuously disturbed. Taking pages from the middle of a pad is what someone does when they have access to the pad over an extended period. Someone who is not worried about the pad being discovered with its pages obviously removed. Someone for whom a slightly disturbed notepad would not be immediately noticed because it was their home. And slightly disturbed notepads are ordinary to families in their own spaces. An intruder, by contrast, would want to leave minimal evidence of having disturbed anything. They would not pull pages from the middle of a pad if they could help it. They would grab from the top, replace the pad, and move on. But the pages came from the middle. This suggests the writer had the pad open, was working through it methodically, removing sheets as needed, continuing work. This is comfortable activity. This is the activity of someone not under time pressure, not performing a swift crime, but engaged in deliberate composition in a familiar space. The missing sheets. Where did they go? Additional sheets were missing from the pad and were never located at the home. This is a critical forensic detail. The practice drafts that were attempted on the original pad were not left where they were written. They were removed. They disappeared. Someone who lives in the home would know where to put something to make it disappear. Someone familiar with the house's spaces would know where to place or dispose of something that they did not want easily found. Someone with time to spare might take care to manage evidence of their drafting work. An intruder, by contrast, would not take time to hunt for disposal methods. An intruder would not carefully remove practice sheets to hide evidence of composition. An intruder in a rush would leave the evidence where it lay, or abandon the pad entirely. The fact that the practice sheets were removed and never found suggests someone who was managing the evidence of their work. Someone who took care. Someone who had time to take care, and knowledge of the home sufficient to know how to make things disappear. This is not intruder behavior. This is the behavior of someone familiar with the space, someone who knew where to hide something, someone who had time to think about covering their tracks. The extended drafting window. How long would this take? We must ask a simple forensic question. How long would it take someone to draft, attempt multiple versions, revise and finalize a 3-page ransom note on an unfamiliar pad in an unfamiliar space while under the time pressure of an active crime? Court documents note that the ransom note was quite long, one of the longest ransom notes in the history of kidnapping cases. The note is addressed to Mr. Ramsey alone. It purports to be written by a group of individuals representing a foreign faction. It includes specific instructions, philosophical digressions, and complex language. Writing such a note carefully enough to get the phrasing right, attempting and rejecting opening lines, revising language, ensuring the tone is consistent, would take time, possibly an hour or more. An intruder in the home would not have this time to spare. An intruder knows that every minute increases the risk of waking household members. An intruder knows that the crime must be concluded quickly. An intruder does not spend an hour carefully composing a ransom note when they could spend 10 minutes writing something functional and leaving. But the evidence of drafting, revision, and refinement suggests someone who took the time to get it right. Someone who had time. Someone for whom the extended presence in the home was not intolerable. Someone living in the home. Someone for whom even an hour alone in the home at night was not extraordinary. Could take this time. Someone who was not in the grip of intruder urgency, could compose carefully. The extended drafting window is forensically consistent with inside activity. It is inconsistent with rapid outside intrusion. The preparation question: why no prepared note? Here is the central forensic question that practice drafts force us to confront. If an unknown intruder planned to demand ransom for a kidnapped child, why did they not prepare the ransom note beforehand? A professional criminal, someone engaging in kidnapping for ransom, would prepare their communication in advance. They would write it at home, in a place of safety, refine it, memorize it, bring it prepared. They would not arrive at the victim's home and begin composing on the fly. The fact that the note was composed in the home, on the home's materials, with multiple drafts and revisions, suggests that either the intruder was extremely unprofessional and did not prepare. The intruder was not a prepared kidnapper, but someone acting under different circumstances. The person was not an intruder at all. An extremely unprofessional intruder is possible, but seems unlikely as an explanation for a crime this calculated. Such an intruder somehow knew the home's layout well enough to access a child's bedroom. They subdued the child with a stun gun. They bound and gagged her. They moved her to the basement. They wrote a carefully composed 3-page ransom note. This does not sound like someone too unprofessional to prepare a ransom note. This sounds like someone operating in an intentional, thought-through way. Unless the thought-through way was not the way of an abductor. Unless it was the way of someone responding to something that had already occurred. The risk of drafting. Detection exposure. We must examine the behavioral psychology of extended drafting in a home where crime is occurring. If the intent was kidnapping for ransom, and the child had been subdued and placed in the basement, then the intruder is on a clock. The child must be kept in the basement. The parents must be kept unaware. The ransom note must be placed where it will be found. The intruder must escape. During this window of activity, the intruder is exposed. If the parents wake, if they come downstairs, if they discover the child missing before the note is found, everything fails. Yet the evidence suggests the intruder spent an hour or more composing and refining a ransom note on someone else's paper in someone else's home while this precarious situation unfolded. This is not rational risk management. A smart intruder would write quickly and leave. A smart criminal does not spend extra time in a crime scene when exposure probability increases with every passing minute. Unless the intruder was not actually operating under these time constraints. Unless the scenario was not truly one of urgent kidnapping. Unless someone was taking their time because they were not afraid of being discovered mid-task. Taking time to draft carefully, to revise, to refine. This suggests someone whose presence in the home during the night hours was not remarkable. Someone for whom being in the kitchen or wherever the notepad was located, writing for extended periods, was not immediately suspicious. This is behavior consistent with someone living in the home. This is behavior inconsistent with someone committing a time-urgent crime. The comfort of extended presence. Psychological implication. When someone takes time to draft and revise a ransom note on their victim's paper, in their victim's home, while exposing themselves to detection, they are communicating something about their psychological state. They are not in acute panic. They are not fleeing. They are not operating in the compressed urgency of an intruder. They are operating with a different temporal experience of the situation. This temporal difference could arise from several sources. Someone familiar with the home, for whom being there at night was not extraordinary. Someone who had already anticipated much of what was occurring. Someone who was not in fact an intruder, but an insider acting in a different capacity than officially described. The willingness to spend time drafting suggests a lack of acute fear about discovery. It suggests someone who felt safe enough to work carefully. It suggests someone who did not, operate under the constraint that every second increased risk of exposure. Someone in their own home, at their own kitchen table, could feel this way. Someone could draft a ransom note carefully and not be in constant fear of waking their spouse or child because they were already aware of the larger situation. Because their drafting was part of a response to something they already knew had occurred. Someone external to the home, committing a crime, would not have this comfort. They would not have this security. They would not take this time. The handwriting consistency. Evidence of control. Court documents note that the handwriting in the original ransom note showed consistency throughout the entire writing. One of the most common means to disguise one's handwriting is to attempt to make the script erratic throughout the text. The consistency of the handwriting, maintained throughout all 3 pages, suggests someone writing in a controlled, familiar manner. Someone not disguising their handwriting through erratic variation. Someone writing as themselves, not attempting to appear to be someone else. But here is what is forensically interesting. If the note contains multiple drafts, as evidence suggests, and if the final version shows consistency, then the writer was maintaining handwriting consistency across the drafting attempts. This is not something an intruder would do. An intruder might attempt to disguise their handwriting. They might try to write in a different style. They might create erratic variations to confuse analysis. But the consistency suggests someone who was not worried about being identified by handwriting. Someone who was not anticipating their handwriting would be analyzed. Someone who was not operating under the assumption that forensic document analysis would later determine who wrote the note. Or someone who was attempting the appearance of consistency across drafts as part of a larger staging. Someone who understood that consistency would seem to rule out Patsy, while the similarities might be enough to keep her as a suspect. The consistency, maintained across multiple drafts in a home while a crime was unfolding, suggests someone with knowledge of how handwriting analysis works. Someone with understanding of forensic examination. Someone who took time to ensure the writing appeared consistent, even as they were revising the content. This is not the behavior of an unprepared intruder. This is the behavior of someone thinking through the forensic implications of what they were writing. The paper placement and pad manipulation. The ransom note was drafted on paper, taken from the middle of a pad, with additional sheets missing and never located. Think about the physical space where this occurred. Someone sits down with a notepad. They remove sheets from the middle. They draft something. They draft it again. They revise. They take those draft pages, practice attempts, false starts, and they hide them or dispose of them. Then they draft the final version on more of the pad's paper, and they place this version where it will be discovered. Throughout this process, they have had the pad in front of them. They have had access to the home's interior. They have had time to work carefully. They have had the security of knowing that being in their current location at 3 or 4 a.m. is not inherently suspicious. An intruder would not have this sense of security. An intruder would not sit with a notepad for an hour, drafting and revising. An intruder would grab paper, write something, and leave. The evidence of extended notepad manipulation, taking from the middle, leaving some sheets behind, removing others, suggests someone in a familiar relationship with physical space. Someone who knew where to find additional writing surfaces if needed. Someone who understood the geography of the home well enough to know where to place or hide draft attempts. This is insider behavior. The forensic principle, extended. Drafting requires secure location. In forensic criminology, we understand that extended time spent on evidence construction, writing, preparing, composing, requires a secure location. A burglar does not spend 30 minutes carefully selecting items to steal. A bank robber does not spend an hour composing the perfect note to hand to the teller. A kidnapper does not spend an hour drafting and revising a ransom note in the victim's kitchen. Extended composition requires security from interruption. It requires reasonable confidence that the person will not be discovered mid-task. An intruder in a home does not have this security. An intruder operates in constant awareness that discovery is possible. An intruder manages time with acute attention to exposure probability. Someone living in the home has security from interruption because being in the kitchen at night, writing, is not inherently suspicious. Someone in a familiar space does not experience the constant alertness that an intruder experiences. The evidence of multiple drafts, careful composition, revision, and refinement, all requiring extended time, is evidence that the writer felt secure enough to spend that time. This security is inconsistent with intruder psychology. It is consistent with insider psychology. The missing sheets, evidence of management. The fact that draft sheets are missing and were never located is itself forensically significant. An intruder would leave evidence where it fell. An intruder in a hurry would not take care to remove draft sheets. An intruder would write the final version and leave, abandoning any evidence of composition. But the draft sheets are gone. They were removed from the notepad. They disappeared from the home. Someone familiar with the home would know where things could be hidden or disposed of. Someone with time could handle evidence management. Someone who lived there could take steps to hide draft attempts from the final version that would be found. Or removal and disappearance of draft sheets suggests someone who understood that evidence of drafting, evidence of extended presence, evidence of revision and composition would be revealing. Someone who took care to manage this evidence. This is not intruder behavior. This is behavior consistent with someone familiar with the space, someone with knowledge of the home, someone with time and intent to manage evidence. The psychological comfort of drafting risks. Here is the central behavioral insight. Someone who takes time to draft and revise a ransom note in a home where they have supposedly just committed a kidnapping is someone who does not experience the kidnapping as imminent crisis. If the kidnapping was real, if it was urgent, if the abductor was in active flight mode, they would not spend an hour drafting a ransom note. They would not attempt multiple versions. They would not revise for consistency and tone. But the evidence suggests exactly this extended, careful composition. This suggests someone who was not experiencing the situation as crisis. Someone who was managing something that had already occurred. Someone who was responding to something they already understood. Someone who had time to think, to draft, to revise. Someone who was managing a situation inside their home, not executing an external abduction. The risk tolerance analysis. Who would do this? We must ask, who would risk extended presence in a home during the commission of a crime? Who would spend time drafting and revising? Who would feel secure enough to work carefully rather than in haste? The answer can only be someone who was not in acute fear of discovery, someone who was not operating under time urgency, someone for whom the situation was already known to others in the home, someone for whom extended presence was not inherently suspicious, someone who lived there. An outside intruder simply would not have this psychological or temporal luxury. The risk profile is too high. The SEWR, consequences of discovery, are too severe. The time spent on drafting is time not spent escaping. But someone inside the home, responding to something that had already occurred, managing the aftermath, taking time to craft a response, that person might work at this pace. That person might revise and refine. That person might spend the extended time necessary to get the statement right. Because for that person, being in the kitchen at 3 a.m. is not remarkable. Being awake during the hours the crime supposedly occurred is not suspicious. Being present in the home during the crime is not something to explain away. What the practice drafts reveal. The forensic truth. When we examine evidence of practice drafts, the false starts, the attempted openings, the revised language, we are looking at evidence of someone who had time, someone who had security, someone who was not rushed by the urgency of escape or the fear of detection. We are looking at evidence of someone who was not an intruder. The discovery that the ransom note was not a first draft, that it was written on materials found in the home, that it showed evidence of extended composition and careful revision, that draft sheets were removed and disappeared. All of this points away from an unknown intruder executing a rapid kidnapping. All of this points towards someone inside the home, with time to compose, with familiarity with the space, with comfort sufficient to spend an hour drafting and revising a ransom note. This is the evidence that forces us to reconsider the official timeline, the official narrative, the official understanding of who was where and what was happening during the hours when a child was lost. Because practice drafts are the signature of unhurried composition, and unhurried composition in a home where crime has supposedly just occurred is evidence of something different from what we have been told. It is evidence that the person holding the pen, drafting and revising words on pages taken from the middle of the Ramsey family's own notepad, felt secure enough to take their time. It is evidence of someone who lived there.
Okay, so I'll jump in here for just a few minutes. So we've been kind of talking about the practice note and things of that nature, kind of going through that a little bit. And so sort of arguing here so far that the ransom note was not written beforehand. John Andrew Ramsey says that it was written, I think, when the intruder got to the house, I guess he argues. I think John also argues that. So I think part of the argument here is that the ransom note was not written beforehand by an intruder, but was drafted, revised, and rewritten on paper found inside the Ramsey home. So I guess it also depends on what you consider beforehand. And so what we have so far and what was considered on the day of by police is that there were practice attempts. You had the Mr. and Miss Ramsey on the same notepad, and the pages were some of the pages were removed from the middle of the pad and not the top. So basically, also too, well, let me just finish this. Not from the top, but from the middle. I think you may have had some missing sheets that were never found. I don't know that. Could have been some sheets in the trash can or something like that they didn't find. Who knows? But some sheets may have never been found. So if this would be the case, this would suggest that someone spent like an hour or more composing, possibly refining the note in the home, which is sort of inconsistent with an intruder's behavior, but sort of consistent possibly with somebody who lives in the house, or somebody, it could also be consistent with somebody who had time and wasn't worried about being caught drafting the note. One of the things that I always, or I'm starting to say more, is that if you're going to sit down, and certain things in this case require time, right? Certain things that you do require some time. You can't just, sit down and or do things in a rush. So one of the key points first. Drafting takes time, yes. Writing a 3-page ransom note with multiple revisions and refinements would take like an hour or more. I think it was said by police or someone I can't remember who estimated that, who estimated that it probably took the writer or the intruder like 30 minutes to write that one note. And that's important because we have to understand what exactly. Now, we don't see any other attempts in terms of getting deep into the note as the one that we have. We do have a Mr. and Miss Ramsey, Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey kind of deal, Mr. and Miss Ram, sorry, kind of deal. But we don't have like a paragraph that says, "Hey, Mr. and Miss Ramsey, you know." Stupid. Mr. and Miss Ramsey kind of deal to where it says, "Hey, you know, Mr. and Miss Ramsey, we like you. We like your business. Or we like you. We like that you're a, you know, what is Michigan? The Midwest? I don't think so. It's the North. I don't know. We love that you're a, and then I think they call West Virginia the South. I don't know. Being from the whatever. Let me find another example. But they might say, John and Patsy, we love that you're wealthy. We love the Tudor style home that you live in, but not the neighborhood where it resides in, is what they might say. I guess they were going to say that, but they decided not to. And they was like, you know what? We don't want to talk about their home. You know, we would just focus on John. So we don't really have where the intruder gave maybe what they were going to talk about. They started to from what we do understand, from what we do know, they started to talk about Patsy. In it, there was something that they were going to address to both, something that had something to do with both of them. But somehow, some way, the intruder didn't think that narrative was important enough to talk about. So they just did away with it and said, let's just focus on John. Okay. The final, and I guess what I'm saying is the final revision that we got, that took 30 minutes is what they're estimating. It does not include the fact that they may have written others and just threw it in the trash or put it in their pocket and took it with them or something like that. That's what it doesn't include. And so, and not only that, but the fact-finding mission that the intruder would have had to have gone on to figure out the ransom bonus amount. So that's highly important. And I just wanted to say that before I don't want to get too sidetracked, but I just want to say that before I forget. So anyways, drafting is going to take time. You know, like I said, it takes 30 minutes to write the version, the final version that we got, but it could have taken an hour or more just to kind of think about, brainstorm and all such as that. And I think in that case, the point would be that the intruder would have a difficult time managing sort of being in the middle of a crime, not necessarily in the heat of a crime yet. It's a crime. You've broken into somebody's house. That's a crime. However, you're not in the middle of the main crime yet, the heat of the crime, the most intense portion of the crime. So you're not actively there, but you are sort of managing sort of like an active crime scene or active crime and risk-taking decisions that you have to make. Okay. And so you have to say all that to say that you have to manage your time appropriately. Anyways, so the second thing that was a key point here is that the paper sourcing, I think, reveals something about the letter writer. So taking pages from the middle of the pad, maybe not just the top, indicates that someone with extended access to the notepad may be familiar with the home, who wasn't rushed or worried about obvious disturbances. I think one of the things that was trying to be communicated was that the person, instead of writing on the top page, and that's why I say I don't know, because the top page could have been full of already, and so the person was just flipping through trying to find a place to write the note. So that could have been why the person decided that they would start in the middle of the notepad, because they were trying to just start somewhere. So anyways, so basically they're taking pages from the middle of the pad, maybe not the top. They've kind of essentially read what's on, or kind of, because I could imagine an intruder seeing what's on the notepad and just kind of, if you're interested to know who you're, robbing at the moment, You can't call it a kidnap case yet, but I guess you're intending. I guess we can call it intending on kidnapping. You want to know a little bit more about them, and we know that based off of what we're being told, that the intruder went on some sort of fact-finding mission throughout the house, trying to find information on, maybe where JonBenet slept at, maybe where Burke slept at, maybe where the parents slept at, what kind of business that John is in. What's hard, I think, at this point is to decipher exactly what the intruder knew or didn't know, how involved he was or was not with the family. My assumption is that he was extremely involved, and it had to be two people that were extremely involved with the family. I think those people would be relatively easier to track down because you're talking about somebody that's been in the house, that knows the house, or maybe has been in the house a few times and is relatively able, someone who's able to pick up. I'm sorry, my mind is going faster than I can speak. Who is able to pick up on the layout of the house relatively quickly. So somebody recommended that it was maybe some construction worker, or maybe somebody who the previous year had come in and done the house tour and maybe remembered, because I think on the house tour, Patsy took them everywhere through the house tour, right? Gave them a full tour, upstairs, downstairs, but it was they were led through the house in a sort of organized way so that the person would have time to walk through, observe, pay attention and get a cool layout of the land, and then be brought back downstairs to one of the main parts of the home, and then leave out of the front door, understanding a general layout. If they came in and saw something, and then if they were to sneak back in a year later, they would understand all of this. But it makes it hard to speculate here about who did what, because we don't know if this person was just, and this is what I'm saying. At some point in time, if we're going to solve this case, we have to stop talking in terms of what could have happened and talk in terms of the possibility of what did happen. And what I mean by that, because I feel like a lot of possibilities prevent us from moving toward a concrete direction. Because I might hear people say, and this is not directed at anybody specifically, but I might hear, and it's definitely no one that I'm thinking off the top of my head right now, but I might hear people say, oh, it's possible that the intruder could have done this. Oh, it's possible that the intruder could have done this. So for that reason, I don't believe this theory, or for that reason, I don't believe this theory. Right. But given the evidence, and given what you know as a strong indication of the direction, right? What are the probable scenarios in that case? That's what we want to know. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Taken together as a whole, not just in isolation, taken together as a whole, what is probable? That's what I'm trying to figure out. And so when we think about this intruder sitting down, writing a note, and it taking 30 minutes as estimated by experts, taking 30 minutes just to write this one. It's a 3-page note. It takes you 30 minutes because, and why do we say that? Let's think through that process. Why do we say that? We say that because this person is thinking on the fly. They're not, and it's one thing to get in the flow of something and say, okay, I want to write this. I want to do it. I want to send this message. But this person has to stop. And that's why I say could have taken 45 minutes. This person has to give up their time. We estimate like 4 hours available to be in there. You're going to take an hour to get acclimated with the house, right? Just acclimated with some things. Take your time, because this person probably doesn't know where everything is. So they're going to take their time wandering through the house to figure out where everything is. I got to know where JonBenet sleeps. Like I said, I got to know where John and Patsy are going to be. I got to understand the threats and what will be a problem to me, right? And one of my concerns is that the house was so wide open that if anybody were to come downstairs, you would be left exposed. That's my problem. If anyone were to come downstairs, you'd be, and you were caught up, like you're in the living room or in the solarium or what have you, and they happened to come that way, you would be caught, dead to rights. Now, possible if you can, if you're, maybe not in this, maybe in the solarium, you'd be good. You could just hide up against the wall and hope they don't come in there. But man, you know, it it's hard it'd be hard to kind of track, you know, what they're doing. You know what I mean? And move quickly. Because if you happen to like look around the living room corner and see Patsy, you hear Patsy coming down the stairs and you run into the breakfast nook, and then you run into I can't remember the name of the room behind it. I think it was one of the rooms leading to the solarium. But you run back there and you're kind of like looking to see what Patsy is doing. And you see Patsy moving. Well, where do you go if Patsy starts coming toward the breakfast nook, right? Do you stay put? Yo, you're going to be panicking, because you don't know if Patsy loves coming that direction to go to the solarium. You know what I mean? So you're going to run through over to the solarium into the living room to try to get away, and then watch Patsy, over here from the living room, try to peek out into the kitchen and see what she's doing. You know what I mean? God forbid that, Bert gets up, hears his mom, rummaging downstairs, and gets up and comes downstairs and says, "Mom, what are you doing?" And you know how kids do. They make excuses to be awake. "Oh, Mom, what are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, I'm hungry. Oh, I just want something to eat. I couldn't sleep because," you know how kids do. Kids just be making up anything to be awake. "Oh, Mom." And so Patsy's like, "Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to go play with your toys while you're waiting for me to make you a snack?" And the child says yes. So the child comes in to the living room where you're hiding, peeking around the door, so you have to run into the solarium. Okay. The kid turns on the light in the living room. We have the light on in the kitchen. Now Patsy says, "Okay, my child is going to be eating in the breakfast nook. I will now turn on this light in preparation." So you're stuck in this little room that is between the solarium, I think, and I'm trying to remember, between the solarium and the breakfast nook. It's like a study or something like that. I just can't remember. But you're stuck in that room, and that is the only room with the light off. But what if Burke is like, "Oh, I want to play airplanes, and I want to make a circle around the breakfast nook." Yo, you have to hide, and like hopefully there's a couch or a door or something like that, to where if he goes through, you can hide behind a chair or something like that and not be seen. Do you know how much stress that is? And how everything has to go right? This is not the movies. How everything has to go right. In the movies are scripted. The movies can be manipulated to show somebody who's cool and calm under pressure because they've done this before. Oh, look, 007, James Bond. Somebody is threatening him with this or whatever, but he stays cool. He's fighting on top of a train, but he ducks, under when the bridge is coming. He ducks over the overpass, and until that time, he's going to wait to the last minute, and then he's going to kind of like bend backwards or contort backwards, weirdly, but he has the flexibility to do so. And he knows that, so he's going to go under the bridge on top of the train, and then when he comes back under it, he's going to get up and start fighting again, and he's got perfect balance so he doesn't fall off the top. This is not the movies. People are going to panic, especially if you've never done this before. There's going to be a lot of panic, a lot of moving, and it's more likely at that point that the criminal just outs themselves because they think that the person is coming toward them, and then they want to get out before anything happens. They want to get out of the house on their own terms. They don't care if you scream. They've now reasoned in their mind that I don't care if she screams. I don't care if anybody screams. I'm essentially found out. I would rather get up and run and be out of here and know that I got out rather than, being sort of like stuck is what I would rather do. And so that's what I'm saying. Like a criminal in that kind of scenario, it'd be hard for me to say that, oh, they just sat there, cool, calm, and collected. They had a story together that they wanted to write about, and they just took their time to kind of work through the house and understand everything, and they had all information. We are assuming that there was no information asymmetry in this criminal, and I don't think you can do that. There is a lot of information asymmetry, I think. And what I mean by that, what I'm meaning to say is that there's a lot of things you don't know. There's a lot of things that the family knows that you don't know. And a lot of times that's a disadvantage to you. That's a disadvantage because you know something I don't know, and you can act off of information that I can't act off. It's like, going to an employer. You go to work for an employer, and there's like information asymmetry on both sides. Stuff that you don't know about the company and what they're looking for, stuff they don't know about you. You might have some social media, way off in the distance, and they don't know about it. So they think that they're hiring this person who doesn't, talk about plants. And you actually talk about plants or whatever, and they're like, well, we like plants. We're a plant business, right? So there's a lot of information as it pertains to this case. There's a lot of information asymmetry as it revolves around the criminal. And so this person is having to put together a story, sitting there thinking through, trying to think critically, how do I want this narrative to flow? And I'm trying to write the narrative as I go, and I'm trying to be perfect over 3 pages because the criminal didn't have any mark outs or scratch outs. They wrote a letter with 3 pages. I want you to sit down right now and come up with a fully thought out narrative. Just try it. Sit down right now and come out with a fully thought out narrative that is cohesive and makes sense over 3 pages. You could probably do it over a paragraph, but when you get into the development of understanding what you want to do, because clearly this criminal didn't want to do what they wrote that they were going to do, and they didn't. So to put something down, to just make up something, to just put something down, to just make it up and be like, oh, this is cohesive. I don't have to scratch this out. This is fine. Anyways, you get my point. I'll see you on the next run. Take care.